push me. Give me the cop. Come on, man, you fucker! Come on, take me! See? You ain't gonna touch me. You convince them that you're crazy enough to do anything, and then they won't touch you.
Mr. Hoffman, why are the Yippies here?
Abby.
Why are the Yippies here?
Well, that's, since we're not a carefully structured organization, you'd have to ask each person that. I mean, it's an individual kind of decision.
Why are you here?
Well, I'm here because I believe in the concept of alternative society. I think American culture is sterile, boring, evil, corrupt, and old. And I think that our task is to build a new society based on new premises. It's like when we were at the stock exchange throwing out the money, there was a tourist there in the balcony. All of a sudden jumped into it, threw over his camera, threw out all his money, and came up and said, I understand what you guys are doing. I've been in here in New York for 2 weeks, and all I've been doing is throwing away money. This is a lot quicker and a lot more fun. I mean, fun is an essential ingredient. Fun has become subversive.
One of the largest peace demonstrations in history was held last October in Washington. More than 50,000 persons took part, and thousands of them marched on the Pentagon to protest the war. A leader of that demonstration was Jerry Rubin, a radical activist of the so-called New Left. We recently asked him his view of the limits of dissent.
We're living in the middle of a beast. Lyndon Johnson is a common murderer, and he should be arrested for murder. There are no limits to dissent. I think the peace movement should have the anger of a Vietnamese woman whose child was burned by napalm, dropped by American planes, way up there in the sky. That's the anger the peace movement should reflect. The peace movement's got to go into the streets, and it's got to use the tactic of disruption.
Essentially what we're going to do is throw a lot of banana peels around Chicago and have the machine stumble. And when it stumbles, it gets into a policy of overkill, and it starts to devour itself.
So the cops are going to turn on themselves?
Or they'll at least,
How do you get
they'll be
time?
they'll be fighting other people in power. See, in Grand Central Station, they weren't just clubbing us longhairs, you see. They started to take on commuters, you know, and people coming home from the opera, and mayor's officials who were wandering around, and FBI agents who were there in secret, disguised as hippies. They're all getting clubbed just like us.
But can that kind of thing protect people in Chicago? Or are you worried
Sure
about that?
Sure it can. I'm not worried about Chicago at all. Of course not. Never worry. Only mothers worry. Duty is
Chicago
to eat.
seems like we are herding ourselves into a stockade, you know?
National anthem, right? They'll have all these boring pigs, you know, fat businessmen, serious, very serious things, see? And they'll be showing this, see? And meanwhile, you know, like every 2 minutes out of every hour, there'll be us out in the streets or up in the park doing all this thing. Wow, 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 the new America, exciting.
But I don't think people should view it just fun in the American sense of fun, you know. Fun can be storming the gates of the International Amphitheater. That can be fun for some people. That can be life.
And it'll be like a football game, see? Football game's a good model.
Right.
Cops versus the Yippies or the National Guard or whoever, the paratroopers from Vietnam. I don't know who they're going to bring back to contain us.
We are not really here to protest. or to make demands like the other groups. We consider demands of the Democratic Party as being a waste of time. We're here to make our statement. Other people want to go and tell the cops want to come down and beat our heads, that's it. I mean, it's all conceived as a total theater, with everyone becoming an actor.
Chairman, most delegates to this convention do not know that thousands of young people are being beaten in the streets of Chicago.
I think I want to say that what is happening to us in Chicago is indicative of what's happening to groups all around the country. For example, the Black Panthers during the past 5 weeks, well, 300 people have been arrested, and it's clearly part of what Nixon calls preventive detention. It wasn't until Nixon was inaugurated that a great deal of activity occurred, and I think that clearly this has been his decision. And I think our legal defense is not going to be involved around the question of justice. It's going to be involved around the legitimacy of the courts in this country as an institution, and the tie between those courts and the political system.
And our long hair makes us guilty too, because the long hair incites the cops to beat you over the head, so your long hair is an incitement to riot. The law was written as, against the game of football, against fans who cross state lines and then tear down the goalposts. See, they're guilty of tearing down the goalposts, crossing state lines with intent to riot. So I want to thank Richard Nixon. I don't think we should forget that this is Nixon's first, he's coming out and fighting for the first time, Nixon. He's out in the streets and fighting, and he's going to be defeated in the streets. Because Nixon decided to prosecute us. It's a federal crime. As a federal law, and the Justice Department is doing it, and Nixon made that decision. So we point the finger directly at Nixon, and we thank him, and we're ready for the fight, and we're going to beat him. I want to thank the ghost of Joe McCarthy, and I want to thank everybody, and see you in Chicago, see you in Washington. Victory.
It was raining, it was cold, in short, it was not a fit night out for man and beast. So it was only natural that those masters of media manipulation, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, should choose this night to hold a news conference.
The only people that can stop this trial are the people in the streets.
We feel that there's a great conspiracy to try and put a few of us in prison for 10 years in order to set an example to the protest movement in this country. It's an absolute ridiculous strategy.
You've taken $100,000 to call everything off.
I would have taken $100,000 as to calling it off. Well,
How much is it worth to you to call it off?
call off
$1
what?
million? Would you have done it for $1 million?
Revolution?
Yeah. What's your price?
My life.
Do you have contempt for your government?
Do I?
Yeah, do you have contempt for your government?
I think the institutions of our democracy are wonderful things that right now are populated by some terrible people.
Please answer the question.
Tell me again.
Do you have contempt for your government?
I'll tell you, Mr. Schultz, it's nothing compared to the contempt my government has for me.
We've heard testimony from 27 witnesses under oath that say you hoped for a confrontation with the police, that your plans for the convention were designed specifically to draw the police into a confrontation.
Well, if I'd known it was going to be the first wish of mine that came true, I would have aimed a lot higher.
It's a yes or no question. When you came to Chicago, were you hoping for a confrontation with the police? I'm concerned you have to think about it.
Give me a moment, would you, friend? I've never been on trial for my thoughts before.
I think we're being tried with carrying a state of mind across the state border. And it's a very unusual law. We're the first ones to be tried under it. We're doing quite well. I think we win every single day but the last. If it wasn't for the law, we'd win hands down, because you've seen their case. It's all never land of insanity that only the U.S. government and the city of Chicago can dwell in.
Our guest is Jerry Rubin, who has done a book called Do It. Mr. Rubin, tell me what you talk about in the book.
Revolution, overthrowing the government, free sex, free dope, free TV.
Do you believe in those things?
I not only believe in it, do it. That's the title, do it.
You did a commercial for Steal This Book, and you having trouble getting it played or so?
We did no station will play it in New York.
We did a radio commercial with all our friends and us, and no station will play.
Well, what did you say in it that they wouldn't?
It's nothing.
It's just the title of the book, Steal This Book. I mean, the New York Times won't take ads for Steal This Book. The ad is nothing but just a picture of the cover of the book.
It says in the back that this book will end free speech.
We're going to publish it ourselves because nobody would publish it.
Young people are the only people in this whole country that have saved the soul of America by protesting the crimes committed in Vietnam, Asia, and at home in the courts and in the jails, etc.
You don't think it's possible that the polarization that your kind of behavior creates, I'm asking you a question, can serve to enhance the position of Dick Nixon in the White House?
Yeah, but see, Nixon will find anything he needs to enhance his power. The fact is there's got to be a polarization in the country. See, America only responds to fire. They only recognize poverty when the ghetto's burned. Take these liberal senators like McCarthy and McGovern and Kennedy, all those guys. They only spoke after the crazies, the freaks, the nuts, the idiots went into the streets and started burning draft cards, started throwing rocks at buildings. Then all of a sudden they said, well, these young people, their methods not be good, but they got a point. What are we doing over in Asia anyway?
It's a revolution primarily first in consciousness. War will be won in terms of head counts, not body counts. And we have to convince a majority of people that there's another way of life, that there's a possibility of founding a nation dedicated to human values rather than property values.
If this isn't a communist takeover of all private property, what do you call it?
I call it a communist takeover of all private property.
Are you a communist?
Well, if you would define it, I would not be ashamed to be one. I'm not quite sure what it is.
Are you a Marxist or a Marxist-Leninist?
Marxist and John Leninist, yeah.
I would like to ask this, Jerry Rubin. Does he really belong to the Communist Party? Does he really?
What do you mean by party? Is that a place where people go and get stoned and have fun and so forth?
Listen,
I belong to the Youth International Party. Haven't you heard? The Communist Party is conservative these days. Where you been?
I mean, we're saying that we're not ashamed of anything that we did in Chicago. We're not ashamed of the way we conduct our lives in between the Chicagos that hit the headlines, that what we're about is an alternative way of living, and we believe in that way of life.
When you advocate change in your own country, and look what happens to us when we advocate change in our own country. We cross state lines to go to Chicago to protest the Democratic Convention. The pigs attacked us in the streets, wouldn't let us assemble in the parks, wouldn't let us march. This was in America in 1968.
By pigs, you're referring to human beings or animals?
I'm referring to policemen.
Well, I've got a shock for you.
You don't like that.
I'm very friendly with police.
Oh, you are you? Well, I got a shock for you. I'm very friendly with the Black Panther Party.
Out. Stop the interview.
Basically, I want to say that I'm very proud of what I participated in the 60s. And nothing that I'm doing today in any sense takes away from that appreciation. And I'm just extremely proud of what we accomplished in the 60s. But I don't want to dwell on that.
Anyway, I am the broken record. I am the has-been, the one that hasn't changed his underwear in 20 years. I'm 50 years old this year. I pay my taxes. I have 3 kids. I have all the hang-ups of being a middle-aged, middle-class American, but I still know shit from shoe polish. But this debate with my old companion from the foxholes is not really about issues, because Jerry has really declared himself out of being a political activist. His opinions are just that. They are cocktail opinions. But we are faced with the problems of the economic squeeze. The 80s are different than the 60s. And how do we grow old? How do we mellow without eating our soul with a shovel, without gobbling up all our political principles?
We had the feeling that the clenched fist was going to transform society. And we were aggressive. And we were not sensitive. And we were not open to self-criticism. But then came the 1970s, and unfortunately, we thought the 60s was going to continue into the 70s, and there was going to be a worldwide revolution. And it didn't take place. And then in 1973, 74, the United States did something that we didn't think was going to happen. The United States got its troops out of Vietnam. And we were shocked about that, because we thought that Vietnam was the essential expression of racist, imperialist American society. And then in 74, of course, came the climax of the 60s, because if we ever thought in the 60s that Richard Nixon was going to be forced out of the White House, we would have said the revolution has happened. But it happened in 74, but it happened because American democracy worked.